Can we work together? Because that's what it takes.
Your Highness, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al-Thani, Amir of the State of Qatar. Your Excellency, Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman bin Jassim Al-Thani, Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of the State of Qatar. Heads of State, Heads of Government, First Ladies, Ministers, distinguished guests, and dear friends, a very warm welcome to the Doha Forum. I'm Rida Fakhri, and it is my honor to be back here in Doha for the forum's 22nd edition, as we continue to build on its long tradition of dialogue, diplomacy, and diversity. But dialogue, diplomacy, and diversity aren't enough in a world that seems addicted to divisions and dysfunction. This year's theme is the innovation imperative. In a world that is changing at a dizzying speed, our global system is struggling to keep up. Many of our institutions are failing to adapt. Our system keeps blinking red. The warnings are deafening, yet we find ourselves stuck in an endless cycle of repetition, of comfort, of stagnation. From the global north to the global south, there is a real crisis of faith and trust in our institutions. As we face so many common challenges and dangers and stand on the precipice of several regional wars and conflicts from the Middle East to the Sahel region to Europe, it has become imperative to find new ways, new approaches to solve our problems, our differences, our crises. Simply put, we must innovate in order to adapt, to survive, in order to make it. The choice is stark: innovate or face irrelevance in a world that does not wait for anyone. As H.G. Wells, the famous author, famously wrote in 1945, at a momentous crossroads in our history, adapt or perish, now as ever, is nature's inexorable imperative. It is no longer an option. The world is constantly changing, and those who do not want to be left behind simply have to change with it. This is an opportunity to disrupt the status quo, to go outside of our comfort zones, to find, or better still, to create new, innovative ways to solve some of the world's urgent existential issues. But how do we apply the power of innovation to the most pressing challenges we face? From wars and conflicts to climate and security to the global order itself, how do we shift to a more open, collaborative, cross-cultural model of innovation? How do we turn endless talk into measurable progress for all? Because frankly, the world is drowning in talk. It's bold action that we so desperately need. So as we convene once again to rethink and reimagine the world not as it is, but as it can and should be, we must have the courage, determination, and bold vision to try new approaches, to fix the glaring inequalities of our system, norms, and institutions, to ask ourselves, are the organizations that represent us today still fit for purpose? To dare to disrupt and reinvent, not carry on with business as usual. It takes creativity and resilience to propel ourselves into a more promising, shared future for all nations, big and small. What happens if we do not try? What will replace the current world order if we wait too long to reshape a long, outdated, anachronistic system? Do we sit back and accept the shortcomings of our global order? Do we stay idle? Can we afford the luxury of inaction in a world on fire? Do we remain silent, settle for more of the same? Do we sit back and simply wait for change to happen? Do we step back into safety or do we step forward into growth? As Steve Jobs once said, the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. So are we ready to be crazy enough to challenge the status quo, or will we keep playing it safe while the world spins out of control? So once again, we meet here in Doha, not just to talk and brainstorm and network, but to take action. Let's make this moment a moment for disruption and constructive engagement. Many of the world's leading think tanks and media organizations are here. They've partnered with the Doha Forum to make this a global platform for dialogue, collaboration, and action. But partnerships and platforms mean nothing without bold steps and courageous decisions. So are we ready to take them? The Forum is proud to have the continued support of its sponsor, the Qatar Investment Authority. It is also grateful to its travel partner, Qatar Airways. Without much further ado, I would like to invite to the stage to open the 22nd Doha Forum, His Excellency Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman bin Jassim Al-Thani, Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of the State of Qatar. Your Excellency.
In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful. Your Highness, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al-Thani, Amir of the State of Qatar. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, may Allah's peace, blessings, and mercy be upon you. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all to the State of Qatar as we come together to mark the 22nd edition of the Doha Forum. This forum has gone beyond being a space for exchanging views to becoming a global platform for bringing together leaders, addressing global challenges, and redefining solutions at a time when challenges are intertwined and paths are becoming more complex. In a world where events have accelerated and crises have intensified in an unprecedented manner, we must return to the fundamental principles while devising new innovative solutions for peace, stability, and development. Hence, our choice of this year's theme for the Doha Forum, the Innovation Imperative, reflects our recognition of the profound challenges facing humanity and the world's need for a new vision that foresees the future and effectively addresses reality. Returning to core facts and then tackling intractable problems with a creative spirit has become an urgent necessity. Previous experiences have proven that adhering to traditional approaches when dealing with intractable crises only leads to reproducing the same challenges and perhaps even exacerbates them. Therefore, we must turn towards innovative solutions for various root issues. Political, security, environmental, and other issues, beginning with the root causes, while taking account of core principles, utilizing available tools, and exploring the opportunities offered by emerging technologies. Esteemed audience, today, we gather at a fateful crossroads for the entire world. Either we succumb to the cycle of violence that is ravaging many regions across the globe, including our own, or we innovate new methods and solutions that not only put an end to the current violence, but also lay a solid foundation for sustainable peace and equitable prosperity, ensuring stability for future generations. There is no doubt that what we are witnessing in the Gaza Strip today is a stark example of this violent cycle and an unprecedented humanitarian tragedy, even a genocide unfolding before our eyes that will have serious repercussions that threaten the stability of the entire region, as evidenced most prominently in Lebanon. This compels us to ask fundamental questions about the effectiveness of traditional approaches in dealing with conflicts. These questions grow more urgent with each passing day. Ladies and gentlemen, the humanitarian tragedy in Gaza continues with its repercussions extending to Lebanon and Syria, making it essential to exert every possible effort to bring it to an immediate end. The success of the temporary pause achieved through joint mediation efforts by the State of Qatar, the Arab Republic of Egypt, and the United States of America, leading to the release of hostages and alleviating human suffering, demonstrates that diplomatic action can succeed when the necessary will is present. This success is further reinforced by other accomplishments delivered by the State of Qatar, such as reuniting children affected by the war between Russia and Ukraine with their families, offering a practical and scientific example of how innovative diplomacy can achieve tangible results. These successes reflect our vision of addressing crises through a comprehensive, human-centered approach, an approach that considers the various dimensions of conflicts: humanitarian, economic, political, and field-related. It focuses on partial solutions that pave the way for holistic resolutions and breaks down the root causes of conflict into actionable components that can be effectively managed. The successive crises have revealed the vast gap between traditional methods and systems on one hand and the rapidly evolving contemporary challenges on the other. Today, the world is in urgent need of advanced institutions for international cooperation that go beyond traditional frameworks, relying on principles of justice and inclusivity while taking full advantage of the tools offered by the digital age. Esteemed audience, we must take a serious and explicit stance in the face of the changes of our time. We are living in an era of tremendous technological advancement, and while these advanced technologies offer vast potential, they also bring emerging challenges and threats, such as the potential misuse of artificial intelligence, digital finance, unmanned aerial and maritime vehicles, and other new technologies and innovations. Therefore, we must take all necessary measures in order to ensure that these technologies remain tools for driving economic development and means to promote peace and human well-being. However, the painful irony lies here. How can a world that prides itself on its technological achievements stand helpless in the face of the suffering of civilians in conflict zones? And how can an international community that speaks of innovation fail or struggle to find effective mechanisms to protect lives and ensure the delivery of humanitarian aid? Esteemed audience, your presence at this forum, comprising decision makers, innovators, thinkers, and civil society leaders, reaffirms our deep belief that innovative solutions arise from the interaction of ideas as well as the integration of visions and experiences. The Doha Forum is not merely a platform for dialogue, but a venue for creativity, a laboratory for innovative ideas, and a launching pad for the solutions that humanity needs today. We have the ability to strengthen our ethical foundations and find solutions to today's challenges with renewed thinking and innovative visions. In an era of major transformations, innovation is no longer a choice. It has become an existential necessity for survival and progress. As the saying goes, necessity is the mother of invention, not only in the field of science and engineering, but also in peace building and diplomatic efforts. Institutions and nations that cling to the methods and tools of the past will find themselves outside the sphere of influence in shaping events and their developments. However, True innovation must remain directed to serving all of humanity, striving to achieve peace, justice, and prosperity for all without exception. I invite you all at this forum to explore new horizons for collective action. The future of humanity depends on our ability to innovate in the pursuit of peace and sustainable development. And may Allah's peace, blessings, and mercy be upon you all.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for highlighting so many of the important reasons we are all gathered here today to do more and to do more in different ways to prevent another painful chapter in our history, like the one unfolding today in Gaza before our own eyes. One of the key drivers of the Doha Forum is to inspire in us the ability to act as catalysts for change. Every year, the Forum recognizes and honors the work of vital organizations and courageous individuals who not only dream about doing things to make life better for their communities, but who actually do it, especially in these difficult times of war and conflict. This year, the Doha Forum is shining a light on the work of 6 individuals who have each left an indelible mark, not just on our mobile phones and screens, but on the world's conscience, despite their own personal losses and deep challenges. They have done it through their brave and unflinching dedication to the pursuit of the truth, and through their unwavering commitment to their own profession and the ideals which it represents. They've also done it for the memory and the sacrifices of their colleagues who were less fortunate than them.
Journalists, all of us wearing flak jackets and helmets, everyone clearly marked as a member of the press. When I got to her, I knew immediately that I had to stop her bleeding as quickly as possible. And then again, we were hit. This time by an even larger explosion.
What happened? I can't feel my legs. I can't feel my legs.
This year's Doha Forum is a tribute to these 6 journalists and photographers who have documented some of the most painful and defining moments of our time. It's also a recognition for the sacrifices that so many have done. It is the 4th annual award of the Doha Forum, and again this year, it couldn't have gone to more worthy recipients. The prize money will be donated on behalf of the awardees to the Rory Peck Trust, which is an international non-profit organization that supports freelance reporters, particularly on issues of mental health following their deployments in conflict zones. It is now my distinct honor to invite to the stage to present the 2024 Doha Forum Award to the awardees, His Highness Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al-Thani, Amir of the State of Qatar. We are fortunate to have with us this year's 6 recipients who will accept the award from the Emir. Please welcome Wael Al-Dahdouh, a Palestinian journalist and bureau chief of Al Jazeera in Gaza. Many of you recognize Wael, a symbol of commitment and resilience. He continued to report on air, live, every minute, every day from Gaza amid the ruins and the devastation, and following his personal loss, the loss of his wife and son, and so many others. Warm congratulations to Wael Al-Dahdouh. May I invite to the stage our second recipient, Motaz Azaiza, a Palestinian photojournalist from Gaza whose body of work over the last year or more has drawn a huge following on social media. He has become to millions of people around the world the eyes and ears of Palestinians in his hometown of Gaza. His photographs have captured every raw and heart-wrenching moment of this horrific war. And here he is to accept his award. Congratulations to Motaz. And may I now invite to the stage Carmen Joukhadar, a Lebanese journalist working with Al Jazeera. She was injured in Israel's shelling of southern Lebanon last year, despite, as you saw in the film, being clearly identified as a member of the press. Carmen has been a journalist and news reporter for 15 years, based in Beirut. Mabruk to Carmen. On to our next awardee, Dylan Collins, the chief video journalist in Beirut for the French news agency Agence France-Presse, AFP. Based in the Middle East for the last 15 years, he is fluent in Arabic. He was wounded by shell fire while covering cross-border clashes in South Lebanon. He also suffered an injury while on assignment in Ukraine. Congratulations to Dylan. Our next awardee is Sadaf Popalzai, an Afghan journalist working as a presenter and host for various programs in Afghanistan. She is the manager of 2 radio stations in her native country, where she continues to play a significant role in the media industry. Congratulations to Sadaf. And last but not least, Christina Haasi, a Lebanese photojournalist and photo editor with AFP. Christina was severely wounded in an Israeli tank shell attack in October 2023 while reporting from South Lebanon. Some of you will remember her. She participated in the 2024 Olympic torch relay in Paris as she honored the journalists killed or wounded in the field. Warm congratulations to Christina. May I now ask all of the awardees to please join His Highness the Emir for a group photo in recognition of the extraordinary work that you all do. Thank you very much indeed, Your Highness. May I ask you to please retake your seat, Your Highness. Many thanks for presenting these awards to these worthy recipients, highly deserved and highly achieved awards at this Doha Forum. Now, while all of these award recipients take their place on stage, may I invite our moderator of the next session to join them on the stage, Yalda Hakim, a journalist who has covered so many hotspots around the world, previously with the BBC, now with Sky News. Yalda, welcome. Every one of these award winners, Yalda, true role models, aren't they, for aspiring journalists, the younger generation of journalists who look up to them and the work they do.
Absolutely.
The epitome of courage. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's such a great honor to be on this stage with these extraordinary journalists who, as we've seen, have been bearing witness and have been a window for the world to the horrors that we've seen globally, but of course in this region as well. I'd like to begin with you, Wael, because of course it's difficult to sum up what you've been through in the past year. You've been covering the situation in Gaza for decades, but the last year has been different. You've lost colleagues, you've lost your wife, your daughter, your son, your grandson, your brother's children, and only hours after burying them, you went straight back to work and appeared on camera. Can you tell me why?
First of all, allow me to salute His Highness Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad, Their Excellencies, here in the Doha Forum. I would like to thank you for this award. This is an award for all colleagues, for all journalists, not only to me. Specifically to martyrs, I would like to name my colleague Ismail Al-Ghul and my comrade Samer Abu Dakka, and my son Hamza Al-Dahdouh, who is also a colleague, not only my son, and all the wounded, those who were detained, and those colleagues who are still there on the ground undertaking this difficult mission despite all the challenges and difficulties that they face. I personally consider this award, this recognition from the state of Qatar and His Highness the Amir, is the second acknowledgement or award. My first recognition or award was when I received a letter from His Highness Sheikh Tamim and His Highness Sheikh Hamad and Sheikh Hamad bin Thamir as well, at a very important moment, a life-changing moment for me. It was a difficult moment, a sensitive moment, a very painful moment. It is not easy for a person when they are a journalist, when they are incentivized, when they are encouraged to conduct their mission in all they have of energy, to understand what is happening in a region like Gaza. Gaza is a besieged territory, but today it is completely destroyed. It is under genocide. As a journalist, your mind is always controlled by the idea that you are undertaking a journalistic mission. However, at the same time, you are conducting your duty, because at the end of the day, there are millions of people who are waiting for your story to understand what is happening. They are awaiting the information that you will be disseminating. They are waiting for the picture that you are trying to portray, to show that there is an attempt to stifle this story and this picture. It is not easy to continue having this courage, this steadfastness, while at the same time, in the same minute, your whole life stops at a halt while you are live on air and you receive a call telling you that your family has been targeted. You go to the area where your family was targeted, you find complete destruction, you find no light, you cannot find anyone, you cannot find your wife, you cannot find your family. There's only dust, there's only the smell of ammunition, and this is the only thing that you find. And here, time simply stops. And you can only see challenges or obstacles as a journalist and also as a human. But at the end of the day, it is your duty to take up this challenge. And this adds further responsibility to your work, further complications to your job. These complications are things that you might not have thought of. And not everybody can bear these challenges, to be honest. But now, at this moment, you have to answer a very realistic question. What will you do? Now, your family is torn apart. It is dispersed all over the place. Some of them died. Some of them are wounded. They need to be taken care of. They need you to be a father to them. While you lost this fatherhood over years of work, what will you choose? Will you choose your family, and that is a duty? Or will you choose your job? You will choose to continue this humanitarian mission that you are on. Without any hesitation, my answer personally was, I want to move on, whatever the repercussions. I think that the highest price that you may pay as a journalist and as a human, I have paid already. What does it mean that you choose a tent or a hospital bed? This does not mean anything. It will mean only one thing. It means that you lost the challenge and you lost your beloved ones. And this is a given. That is why one of the most important things that pushed me to continue and to keep moving with my mission is it is the blood of those people, their story, their pain. That is sure, because they paid the price. They sacrificed for me and for this cause and for this people, because they let go of my role as a father, as a source of strength, of security. They let go of all of this just for me to conduct my mission. So when they are killed in this manner specifically, we cannot accept to be weak, to isolate ourselves, to disappear from the media scene. This is simply unacceptable to us. It doesn't exist in our minds. That is why the answer was, we shall continue with our mission. However, I cannot hide that there were additional difficulties. We have daughters, we have members of our family who are wounded. How can I convince them now that after their mother died, you will not be with them? You will not be next to them. You will leave them in their hospital beds and go and continue working. I was very honest with them. I will tell you very frankly, I was very honest with my children. And even in these moments, they told me, we are with you. We will either die together or live together, continue together.
يعني لا أخفيكم بأن
Very honestly, this gave me a lot of strength to keep moving, to continue. The story that came out of the Gaza Strip, and we were the few who remained in Gaza actually to tell this story. But I can tell you that there are millions of people around the globe waiting to hear this story, this message, this voice. This meant a great responsibility for us. That is why we had to continue with this mission. And of course, after having full faith in God, we came back every time we were targeted, when the family was targeted, when our house was destroyed, when our offices were destroyed, and when I was targeted personally and lost my friend Samir Abu Daqqa in the process, and when my son Hamza died at the same time. Every time I lived the same pain, but the same answer was my answer every time, and that is to go back to my camera, to my microphone, and most importantly, to come back in a balanced way, in a professional way, in a strong way, without any emotions, but to continue playing this humanitarian, this human, noble role to reach the world in all professionalism. May the peace and blessings of Allah be upon you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Wael, for the service that you have given, and you've really given new meaning to courage, bravery, and service to journalism. Motaz, you and I have spoken in the past, soon after you left Gaza. The Committee to Protect Journalists has said that this is one of the most dangerous and deadliest years in journalism because of the number of journalists that have been killed in Gaza. I mean, like Wael, you too have experienced loss of your family, your friends, and you continue to cover the conflict there.
First, thank you, Elda. I want to take a few seconds to take Your Highness, Your Excellency Sheikh Mohammed, and every Qatari citizen for their support and help for me to connect and reach the world to speak about my cause and the ongoing genocide in Gaza. So thank you from my heart. What CPJ talk about is they have a few numbers. It's not the accurate number because now in Gaza, who's on the ground, it's the citizen journalists. More than the official journalists. Yeah, because we experienced the whole things from the first days, and a lot of who was on the ground, who got injured, he evacuated his family, so most of them now who are just like the citizen journalists with a few official journalists for the TV channels. So now the number of journalists who got killed, more than 180. In day 60 in Gaza City, I asked for international protection for myself because I start to receive phone calls from no caller ID to tell me what to do or not to do, where to go, or you should show something else, and you may lose your life. And also the threats and the bombing in my neighbor and the loss of my relatives, more than 25. So it was all challenging for you to continue your work on the ground. And in the last days, it's not about just showing the world, it's about to survive, because days before I leave, the Israeli tanks was at the end of my street, and it's now you should work to find water, food, a tent to use if they invaded your area, what you will do. And your house is now not your house. It's like a shelter for more than 40 people. And every house also like in Gaza. I'm living now in Deir al-Balah, and more than 1,800,000 people now in this area. We used to have just 50,000 people in this area, which was so crowded. Imagine now more than 1,800,000 people, and they just all on the beach with their tents. And now it's winter, and there is no there's no access for clean water. There is no access for medicine. There is no access for flour to eat. And now it's winter. So it's not only just about you as a journalist, it's about your life. Because you're not just an international journalist who do your mission and leave and you get paid, that's it. No, it's your home. What's happening, it's happening to your family, to your friends. Like I'm a journalist, but I lost 16 of my friends. And during my work on the ground, you go to document something, you find your friends under the rubble. So should I just document them, or should I leave my camera on the side and try to grab them from under the rubble, because there is no machines with the civil defense? So it's unimaginable situation for journalists. You can't be just a journalist there.
Motaz, thank you so much. Christina, Carmen. Christina, Carmen, Dylan, you were all in southern Lebanon together. We saw on the video when there was an attack. And Christina, you are now living with those injuries. Just tell us about that moment, that day. I mean, I think us journalists, we go to places and we don't assume that something is going to happen. You do feel protected.
First of all, let me start by saying thank you to Your Highness and to Qatar. I grew up here. I lived for 15 years here, so it means a lot to receive this recognition from Qatar, who I consider my second homeland. October 13 it still feels surreal. It was such a horrific day. However, everything was calm at first. There was no danger. We felt safe because we weren't really at the front line. Everything that was happening, it was happening in Gaza, on the other side. So we felt safe, especially that we followed all precautions. Unfortunately, little did we know that we will be attacked twice, and after the 2 attacks with a machine gun as well, which feels like a Hollywood movie in a way. We lost our dear friend Aysam Abdullah, who's also a Reuters journalist, and I am here today because he took all the impact, and that's how I managed to survive, even though I had 50% chance of living, and I was 2 weeks in induced coma. It's been a year, I'm still in a wheelchair, and I still need another year to start walking. However, I just can't wait for that day, because that's how we will get back our justice. As our colleagues... Thank you. As Mu'taz and Wael were saying, when something that bad and extreme happens to you, you have 2 options. Either you give up and you say, okay, right now I'm a victim and that's it. My entire life changed. Or you keep fighting until the day you actually stand up, hold your camera, and do what you love. Because that's our duty and that's our job. We didn't choose to become journalists just for the fame. I personally was behind the camera, and I really don't like being in front of the camera. But after what happened to us, I felt like there's a need to keep speaking up, sharing our story for me, for us, for Aysam, and all our colleagues who've been targeted this year while they were asleep, or their families, like in different horrific ways. Thank you again for this recognition. It means a lot, and hopefully next year I will be walking. Thank you.
Thank you. And Carmen, you went back to work very, very soon after the attack. Tell me about that.
Well, before talking about the comeback, thank you, Your Highness, for the award. Thank you for bringing us all together in the Doha Forum. It means a lot to me. This award means a lot to me because this is an acknowledgement for all the work and contribution that I've done during the coverage since October 7 with Al Jazeera. Certainly, I couldn't have done that without Al Jazeera's support, without the support of Your Excellency, Mr. Hamad, Sheikh Hamad bin Tamir Al-Thani. Well, actually, since day one, since I was at the hospital, I got the question, are you coming back? And I said, I just need the doctor's approval. And it was so clear for me. I don't see myself as a victim. I don't see myself as a survivor. I'm a journalist. I was attacked because I'm a journalist. And I will come back to the field as a journalist, respecting all the norms, all the values. And the comeback was very meaningful, not only for me, but for the people. Whenever they see me, they're like run to tell me their stories. And a few days ago, I was like surrounded by the rubble in the south of Lebanon. And those stories we heard, the attacks we witnessed for like 14 months, it was huge. And the loss, I mean, I cannot even describe the loss we witnessed, we saw actually during these 14 months. When I chose being a journalist, for me, this is not a job. For me, this is like even more than a career. You choose This is a way of life. This is a way of perceiving things. You know, journalists see things differently than others do. So coming back to the field, and especially with what happened in the last 3 months in Lebanon, was extremely important for me, was extremely important to put up in front of everybody the truth, to give voice to those voiceless, and to say, nobody can tame my voice. And especially when our footage from the south of Lebanon, when the Israelis used the white phosphorus, this footage was asked by international NGOs investigating in this usage. And they used Al Jazeera's footage from several places, and it was a very important document. Now we're documenting, we're informing people, each and every one of us, about what's happening, either in the south of Lebanon or in Gaza. It's the same for all of us. And there's another side. When you see all your colleagues being killed, being targeted, for example, Eli Brachia, the cameraman who was with me, got injured, and I didn't have the chance to think, but to help him and save him and to take him to the hospital. This is the only thought I had. And when we were covering this war in the last few months, in October, our colleagues were sleeping. They killed 3 of them, and others got injured as well. So this didn't stop. And I know it's hard to change the reality. It's so hard for us to change the reality. But we need to document this. We need to say no for this. Impunity should stop. And stopping the impunity starts with each and every step every single one of us does. From our perspective as journalists, we need to document these atrocities, especially for civilians. They need to be heard, and their stories need to be heard. So this is the major role for us. It's going to be hard for us. It's going to be hard for our families, of course. But this is a choice you make. And thankfully, my family respect this choice and support me. So I will continue covering.
Thank you.
And I will never stop.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dylan, you were injured on that day in October in southern Lebanon, but you were also injured in Ukraine when you were covering the war in those early days. And we mustn't forget the journalists there, the local journalists who continue to cover that conflict and continue to be in the line of fire.
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like also to thank the state of Qatar and Your Highness Amir for the generous gift and for this recognition. It's a huge honor. Yeah, I was wounded about 3 months before we were hit in October on the outskirts of Bakhmut by a Russian Lancet drone. And I guess what this past year has really underlined for me is just how dangerous our job can be. I lost several friends in Ukraine. I lost several friends in Gaza. I lost friends in Lebanon. I think sadly, it's never been more dangerous of a time to be a journalist. We've watched this press vest, this label of press on our chest. It's supposed to protect us, and it's sadly turned us into a target. We've seen more than 100 journalists in Gaza targeted by Israeli strikes and killed. I'm a cameraman. I'm not super comfortable talking, but I think what I do know is that when they're trying to turn your cameras off, it means that there's something worth covering. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dylan. Thank you. And finally, Sadaf, you've just arrived from Kabul. You said that it's one of the first time you've left the country, and it's increasingly difficult not just to be a journalist in Afghanistan, but a woman in Afghanistan with so many restrictions. Just talk us through briefly about some of the challenges that you face.
Thank you. First, I want to say thank for Qatar and also the Amir of Qatar, also organizer of these events. Yeah, that's my first time that I lived Kabul or Afghanistan and coming here. Because of that, I say thank for all of you to support us, and also member of movie group special leadership and management of MOBI Group to support us. That's not easy to us to work in this situation, but I want to say something, don't about just my own problems or situation. I just say about my country. And also, we know about situation of Afghanistan. I know all of them is involved in situation of Afghanistan, and they know everything about Afghanistan. In this event, I just say them, don't forget Afghanistan and people of Afghanistan. Also, in this situation, I like to say we need support. We need to be in the world and be alive. Also, just we want that organizations or the countries they support Afghans, not just something special or someone special. Just don't forget Afghanistan peoples. You know about situation or about challenging, about everything that's going in Afghanistan. And thank you for you and all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, could you please thank our very brave journalists for speaking to us about their stories. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Yelda, and thank you to all the award recipients, Mahmoud, Mu'taz, Dylan, Carmen, Sadaf, and Christina. And once again, congratulations. Such inspiring words, such bravery, such grit. Next, a keynote speaker who needs absolutely no introduction, but I will still attempt a short one. She is a community college educator, a teacher, and an author. And if you still wonder who she is, here's another hint. Back in 1977, when she married a certain senator from Delaware, who would go on to become the 46th President of the United States, she said that she knew it would be a life in the spotlight that she had never sought or wanted, and she was right. First, as second lady for 8 years, and then as first lady for 4 years. And of course, First Lady of the United States, that is. She has had a lifetime in the spotlight, and she has put it to good use, to focus on all the issues that are closest to her heart, from education to health. While urging Americans, after the recent election, to put their disunity behind them and to unite for a brighter future. Please welcome Dr. Jill Biden.
Good morning. Your Highness, it is an honor to be here with you. And I have been overwhelmed by the generosity and warm welcome that you and the people of Qatar have shown me on my visit. On behalf of my husband, the President Biden, and Joe, thank you for your kindness and your warm welcome here on my visit. And I'm glad to be with so many heads of state and leaders from across the globe here in Doha. Yesterday, I visited the Qatar Foundation, which has a magnificent view of Education City. Looking out at all the world-renowned learning institutions, I thought of the incredible minds and cultures and ideas coming together. And I appreciate Her Highness Sheikh Mosa's leadership in an area we both deeply care about, education. As First Lady, I continue to teach writing at a community college. And in my classes, we talk about stories and how our stories shape our world. The stories can divide us. They can isolate us and make us fearful. But stories can also help us to connect us to one another and inspire us to join hands for a better future. That's the story unfolding on the campus of Weill Cornell Medicine here in Qatar. Innovation through cooperation. Yesterday, I met a medical student who is studying why the risk of ovarian cancer goes up with a particular gene mutation. Another student is designing a surgical device that can clean the lens of a camera during an operation without removing it from the patient's body. That will make surgeries more precise. It's promising work. But what fills me with even more hope is meeting with people who are powering those discoveries. Students from Qatar and countries from around the world at an American academic institution located right here in Doha, uncovering health breakthroughs that have the potential to improve people's lives in this region and globally. This year's Doha Forum is focused on innovation imperative. I believe the first imperative for innovation is cooperation. People of all backgrounds and expertise working side by side, creating something better than we could have alone. As First Lady of the United States, I have had the opportunity to travel the world, from Japan to Ecuador, from Namibia to Ukraine. Everywhere I go, I am reminded that our differences are precious and our similarities infinite. Still, on those trips, there have been some who ask me, why visit a drought in Africa? Why meet with wounded warriors in the United Kingdom? Why visit refugees in Romania? But if we are reminded of anything during the COVID-19 pandemic, it is this: diseases do not recognize borders. Neither does hunger, poverty, or violence. We are all connected. Even when times are tough, we share a responsibility to come together. And whether it is fighting disease or working for peace in the region, we must bridge divides so that all people may live with dignity and security. President Biden, my husband, understands that there isn't one leader, one government, or one country that can go it alone, not in a world as interwoven as ours. The world challenges aren't only ours to endure together, they are ours to solve together. That can be this generation's story, one of cooperation, understanding, and opportunity. Consider climate change. The consequences of extreme heat, droughts, melting glaciers, and typhoons reverberate around the world. But so too could new technologies with the power to reduce carbon emissions, address water scarcity, and make communities more resilient. It will take all of us committing to change, sharing our best ideas, and creating innovations that reach everyone, just as fast and as far as any wildfire or ocean wave. Another area that's ready for innovation is women's health research. Globally, women tend to live longer than men, but we spend 25% more time in poor health. Innovations are happening all around the world to close the health gap. Imagine a blood test, the first of its kind, that can reduce the time it takes for women to get a diagnosis for a debilitating disease like endometriosis. Or think about the benefits of uncovering why Alzheimer's is more common in women than in men. This work isn't just up to scientists and researchers. Governments, academia, the private sector, and NGOs all have to coordinate to make sure that the benefits of innovative research reach the people who need them. Your Highness, I am here in Doha as part of my final foreign trip as the First Lady of the United States. In the coming years and months, I will continue to help close the gap in women's health research. And as the leaders in this room will always have a partner in me to move forward life-saving and world-changing innovations that improve our world. This imperative is to join together. It is not our burden, it is our opportunity. So let us build strong partnerships and innovate our way to better health, opportunity, and prosperity for all. A brighter world can be our story to tell. So let's write it together. Thank you very much. Thank you, Your Highness.
Thank you, Dr. Biden, for highlighting the many challenges that unite us all, from the world's wealthiest nation on earth to the poorest, and that require joint efforts to solve them. Could I now please ask you all to remain seated as we embark onto our opening panel discussion, aptly titled Conflict Resolution in a New Era. It is my pleasure to invite to the stage His Excellency, Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman bin Jassim Al-Thani, Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of the State of Qatar. It is also my distinct pleasure to invite His Excellency Espen Barth Eide, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Norway. And last but not least, may I invite Minister of External Affairs of the Government of India. CNN's Chief International Anchor, Christian Amanpour.
Okay, welcome. It's great to be here. And I would just also like to add my personal congratulations to those fantastic journalists who were honored and really respected today. Welcome to the First Lady of the United States and to everybody else. So, as we know, this conference is built around the themes of, as we've just said, diversity and innovation, and how to try to fix the big world issues that we are facing right now. I want to start by asking all of you the breaking news, if you like, because as if there weren't enough wars, destruction, and death happening in this region right now, it appears that we've all been surprised by what's happening in Syria. It appears that apparently no intelligence agency predicted this, and these rebels, whoever they are on their way potentially even to Damascus. We're hearing from the Wall Street Journal that the family of President Bashar Assad has left and has gone to Russia. I don't know, can I just start by asking you, Prime Minister, this is your region, yet another crisis. What do you expect will happen there? Do you think Assad can hang on?
First of all, thank you, Christian, for having me in this panel. I would like also to thank and welcome all our guests who participated with us here this year in Doha Forum, and I think it's we are having this forum this year in a very important and critical period in our region. Of course, from the situation in Gaza and then the expansion of this situation beyond Gaza. Well, first of all, I think that there are two factors when it comes to what's happening right now in Syria. The first factor was really anticipated because of what's happening in Gaza and what we've been actually trying to warn everyone around the world that this situation in Gaza is going to expand, is going to have its consequences on the entire region, and we have seen this is expanding gradually, whether it's in Lebanon or what's happening with the Red Sea. And so basically I believe that anyone who eliminated the fact that Syria is away from that conflict was mistaken. The second factor to this is really ignoring the situation in Gaza, while we had an opportunity at that time, in Syria, while we had an opportunity in that time when the war over there has calmed down, yet Assad didn't seize this opportunity to start engaging and restoring his relationship with his people, and we didn't see any serious movement, whether it's on the return of the refugees or on reconciling with his own people. Of course, I believe that everyone around the world is very surprised with what's happening in the last few days, and not surprised with the move itself in the same manner as they are surprised how fast they are advancing and how fast they are progressing. This situation might evolve and becoming more and more dangerous, and our worry that this will bring us back to the old cycles of internal violence, the civil war, and this will really threaten the integrity, the territorial integrity of the state of Syria. And honestly, is going to damage and destroy what's left if there is any sense of urgency to start putting a political framework for what's happening over there and trying to address the issue from a political perspective in order to find a sustainable solution there.
Let me ask, I see you nodding, Foreign Minister about Ida. Again, this is a huge surprise, not just the speed, but the fact that it happened. Apparently, they've been planning for a while, and nobody kind of picked up on it. Do you think that this is a step towards a failed Syria state? And do you know who this Jawlani, the head of this group, is? What does he represent?
First I have to say I'm really happy to be at the Doha Forum and in this panel. And I agree with the Prime Minister. We work closely with Qatar on many of these issues, and we have both been warning that the conflicts in the Middle East would spread. So when you say surprised, maybe the exact moment, the exact way it was spreading, but the fact that it would continue to spread should not be any surprise. There's a direct link between the regional dynamics and the intra-regional dynamics here, because the weakening of Hezbollah, indirectly the weakening of some of the proxies of Iran, but also Russia being more engaged in Ukraine, has led to a power vacuum of sorts in Syria, which has been seized on by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and these groups, who are also, transforming themselves, or at least presenting themselves in a new light. And the fact that the Assad forces are not putting on more resistance might suggest something that could move to a failed state. And there has been many warnings, many attempts to say Syria is not over. It might be simmering. The humanitarian situation is terrible already, getting worse. Remember, people were fleeing from Lebanon into Syria. Now a lot of Syrians are again fleeing or moving around in Syria, forced to be on the move. And the calls for a political settlement are more important than ever. But there have been too many groups in Syria, including the leadership, who have been thinking that they were about to win, so they were not ready to engage in compromise. But I think there is time for really to call for dialogue, for a political settlement, and to try to stop this before it really goes totally down the drain. And it just illustrates such an important point. The conflicts in the region are intertwined, but they're also intertwined with conflicts in other regions, because there is not a separate European, Middle Eastern, or Asian theater. They are increasingly connected to each other as well.
Which is a great way for me to ask you, Foreign Minister Jaishankar, sitting there in India, and this is not necessarily your region, but what's happening here, how does it affect you? What do you see happening in Syria? And more to the point, on the topic of this conference, how does one innovate with dialogue out of, let's just take the Syria situation right now. We can hang the Israel, Gaza, Iran off that, but Syria.
Well, let me go back to your first question. Is it a surprise? The answer is yes. I would also agree with Sheikh Mohammed in the sense that the region was in such prolonged ferment that surprises will occur when this goes on for so long. Yes, we are to some distance away, but let me just put that in some perspective. We still have about 500,000 Indians who live in Mediterranean countries. We have a trade of about $80 billion with the Mediterranean. Now that's the Mediterranean. If I'm looking at the Gulf, we have 10 million Indians here and maybe about $180 billion of trade. Now why do I mention that? Because I think what's happening in Syria, what's happening in the larger region, what's happening in Gaza and Lebanon, in Iran, the combination of all of this, there is a larger regional instability which is actually growing month on month. It is impacting, as a country on that side of Asia, we are feeling the impact of this. I mean, we're feeling it in shipping costs, we're feeling it in trade disruptions, we could see it in radicalization. I mean, so today, instability anywhere actually is a source of concern. There's no region you can say that's far away and it doesn't matter to me anymore. And by the way, this region is not so far away, and our interests are there, as I spelled out.
Prime Minister, the Biden administration, who you've been working for, is in its last days. Everybody here, everybody around the world, leaders are waiting to see what a new Trump administration means for the major issues around the world. So for here, you have been sort of the linchpin, Qatar, in the negotiations, certainly historically and currently, regarding Israel and Gaza and hostage release and ceasefire. It's got nowhere, but we understand it's restarted. What can you tell me about the state of a possible ceasefire right now and the impact of a Trump administration on the region?
I think first, when we look at the current state of the negotiations, it's been through ups and downs since the start of the war, and all of us, we have seen when November 23 the deal was concluded to release the first batch of hostages, around 109 Israelis plus 15 foreigners, in exchange of 250 Palestinian prisoners. And since that time, we've been back and forth within the same process, within the same framework that we are discussing until today. we have seen moments in time throughout the negotiations where, unfortunately, the process itself being exploited for political reason from one party or another, and a lot of scrutiny that we've been through because of some parties trying to score some political points. Now, especially in the last days of just before the elections in the United States, we have seen that the momentum in the negotiation became very much in declination, and we didn't sense a real willingness to reach a closure for what's happening over there, and that's when, similar to the step that we took back in April, until we see how things will go and if there is a possibility for a momentum to rebuild.
Is there now?
We have sensed, yes, actually, we have sensed after the election that the momentum is coming back. And now, when it comes to any differences between the previous administration or President Biden's current administration, the outgoing one and the incoming one, of course, there will be some differences in the themes and the approach that and the way they are approaching things. But we didn't see or recognize any disagreement on the goal itself to end the war. And that basically was very important for us to understand especially after the election, because, whether we like it or not, it has an impact on the decisions and what's happening on the ground. And it was the contrary. We have seen a lot of encouragement from the incoming administration in order to achieve a deal even before the president come to the office, and that's actually made us trying to move things back and trying to put it back on track, and we've been engaging in the past couple of weeks. Now, in terms of where we are, Christina, that this matter is affecting a lot, whether it's affecting the people in Gaza and the suffering that they are suffering, or even affecting the families in Israel, the families of the hostages. And unfortunately, given the way it's been managed throughout the year and everything being put out in the public domain, raising the hope for those innocent people has been counterproductive, because every time we got frustrated with the disappointments that we've been through in that. So we are trying as much as possible right now to protect the process in order to make sure that we can achieve a meaningful results. What we hope and what we expect, we hope to get things done as soon as possible. We hope that the willingness of the parties to engage in a good faith continues in the same manner. And if you look at the gaps and the disagreements, they are not something substantial that really affect the agreement. It's all about the main questions. Is there a willingness to end the war? Yes or no? Is there a willingness to have an exchange deal? Yes or no? Those are two very simple questions with very simple answers. If the answers are yes on both questions, then we have a deal.
Okay, so from your perspective in Europe, one of the main issues is what will be the political, and I assume from your perspective too, Prime Minister Al-Thani, what is the political decision for Gaza afterwards? As you know, Prime Minister Netanyahu has not laid down any political plan for post-war in Gaza. The allies, Saudi Arabia, the United States, Qatar, everybody says it must be also a Palestinian state and a withdrawal of Israel. Your country is from Gaza. Your country is one of those who's already recognized a Palestinian state. You were behind the Oslo Accords, so you have a really central role. Where do you think this is going politically?
That's the essential question, and I want to commend the excellent work of Sheikh Mohammed himself and his deputies and wonderful diplomats in working towards a ceasefire. But we also work together with a group of OIC and Arab League foreign ministers, including the Prime Minister, His Highness Faisal Al-Farhan of Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Egypt, Jordan, Turkey, others. And we connected that to a broader group of European countries, and we now have established a global alliance for implementing the two-state solution. And what convinced us to join this initiative, which is very much an Arab-owned initiative, but now becoming a much more global initiative, is that we need to think about the immediate, but we also need to think about the long term. Because you can't do either one or the other. Without the immediate, you will not get to the long term, but without reflecting on the long term, you might not get to the immediate solution. And this comes back to what to do with Gaza afterwards. And it must be the moment to really move towards a Palestinian state. We need a two-state solution, but not a three-state solution. We want an integrated Palestine compromising, the West Bank, and Gaza, relevant parts of Jerusalem, as was envisaged in the Oslo Accords. And the drama, the horror is so deep now that we cannot go back to 6th of October last year. That was not a stable, lasting situation. It was like a minefield. People might have not stepped on the mine, but it was about to explode. It did explode. And here comes to your question about the incoming US administration, because President-elect Trump was very vested in the Abraham Accords. I think the message now from this region is that that is perfectly doable. There might actually be a major deal, but it has to happen with Palestine. And I think as long, and this is also what the group that Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Norway, the European Union, others are forming now, is a very collective message that this is the time to think big, to think political solution, to think that peace for Israel, peace for Palestine, regional peace is connected. Because all these different conflicts, they are not the same. It's not one conflict, but there is a root conflict that connects to all of them, which is the absence of a solution to the Palestinian question. And that has been the driver of Norway's and my own foreign policy over this last year, to really see that today it cannot be just a Western country or two to come in to fix it. It has to be embedded seriously in this region. And we have to make sure that also Israel becomes a country not only in the region, but of the region, connected to its neighbors in peace. And that can only happen with a Palestinian state. And honestly, it might sound naive, but I think it's actually hard politics. There is no alternative, so we have to move forward. We must dare to think outside the box.
Yes, I'm going to come back to that, because certain members of the incoming US administration who've been nominated to work on this have suggested alternatives, including annexation and the rest. So I'll get back to that in a second. But to you, Foreign Minister Jaishankar, it is said that certainly we know Prime Minister Modi had a very close relationship with President Trump in his first term. We know that the Biden administration also, in fact, they were trying to hopefully drive a wedge or attract you from China and into the US sphere more. But President-elect Trump...
We were trying to attract them into the Indian sphere as well.
Yeah, okay. I don't know how it worked out, but right now you've got a whole threat of tariffs in the whole region and all the rest of it. President-elect Trump has also threatened BRICS, of which you are a member, with 100% tariffs if this and that. What do you expect for India and for your economy and your relationship with the United States and regional implications as well from that kind of message already from President Trump-elect?
Look, we had a good relationship, a very solid relationship with the first Trump administration. Yes, there were some issues, mostly trade-related issues, but there were a whole lot of issues on which actually President Trump was very international. He was very forward-leaning. And I remind people that it was actually under Trump that the Quad was restarted. So if you look at the Indo-Pacific today, I mean, certainly President Biden built on it. But if you look at the Indo-Pacific today, in fact, it's an area where the United States made new commitments, as indeed did all of us. So I would say, from our perspective, quite honestly, I mean, there's a certain personal relationship between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump. I would say in terms of politics, we don't really have divisive issues in terms of our political outlook. As two countries, by and large, I think our convergences way outstrip any differences we have. Where the BRICS remark was concerned, I think, I'm not exactly sure what was the trigger for it, but we've always said that, look, India has never been for de-dollarization. Right now, there is no proposal to have a BRICS currency. So I'm not quite sure what is the basis for.
He said
for
if
that.
you stop pegging it to the dollar, but there wasn't a threat to do that, was it?
Well, the BRICS do discuss financial transactions, but certainly where India, BRICS doesn't, each country doesn't have an identical position on this. But where India is concerned, certainly, look, the United States is our largest trade partner, and we have no interest in weakening the dollar at all. But I just want to make one remark on come back to the Middle East. The core issue undoubtedly is Palestine and Israel's relationship. How do they reach a modus vivendi? There's a larger issue side by side, which is the widening of this conflict, which is also a major concern. And, today we have, I don't want to say we normalized it, but the fact is, 2 years ago, the prospect of Israel and Iran actually firing at each other would have been appalling. It's something which we couldn't have even contemplated. And yet it's happened. If you look at what's happening in the Red Sea and the impact for shipping in Asia, it's huge. So I think, there are different sort of challenges, layers of them. But just like the journalists who sat on these chairs before us told us, look, it's a tough world, very difficult, but we journalists have to do our job. Yeah. I think similarly, diplomats of the world have to tell themselves, it's a messy world, it's terrible, there are conflicts, but therefore there's all the more reason for diplomats of the world to step forward. And that era, which we saw in the 60s and 70s, which is either the Security Council managed it, or a few countries, mostly the major powers did it. I think that era is behind us. Yeah. I think all of us in different ways need to step forward. So, for example, what Qatar is doing, there are so many conflicts. We are trying to do something in Ukraine. We see Myanmar as almost a kind of a forgotten conflict, where there's an approach like, let's not invite them and the problem will solve itself. So I think there is a greater case for more vigorous diplomacy, for more innovative diplomacy, for a more participative diplomacy, and I think more countries need to have the boldness to bite that bullet.
Let me just ask you, Prime Minister Al-Thani, you just told Time magazine, to Foreign Minister's point, the Middle East is unfortunately dancing on the edge. In terms of your historic role in negotiations, as you know, some powerful Republicans in Washington are threatening to pressure your government to cut ties with Hamas officials. How do you respond to that kind of pressure, and do you think it'll increase?
Well, with all the respect, for any other country's politician demands on Qatar on certain policies, not all of them also understand where Qatar stands and what its position. And unfortunately, even some politicians, they have no idea where Qatar is located. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to offend anybody, but it's because it is the reality, when it comes, for example, when, talking about Iran, or talking about our relation, or the office, when Taliban office opened here, or when Hamas office opened here in Doha. It's basically this, this kind of fabric, it's the fabric of our region that we are living in. Most of the challenges that we are living in today, it's happening between state actor and non-state actors.
Yep.
And those non-state actors becoming like a major player, a major factor in the instability of that region. So who's going to engage with them? Do we have, if we would reflect just on 30, 40 years ago in that region, any of the conflicts that happened in the region being resolved in the battlefield and ended there? None of them. Any of those situations being de-escalated or contained without having these lines of communication? All of them. Now, the major question here, if not Qatar is talking to everyone and trying to engage with everyone, who will be the alternative? You know, it's my role here as a country, it's my responsibility to ensure that the region around me is stable, to ensure also my stability and my national security. And in order to ensure this stability, I need to engage with every party. I need to get the conflict to be resolved in a peaceful manner, and I need to ensure a better prospects for the region. And as I just mentioned in an interview with Yelda a couple of days ago, that if we are doing something wrong, let them identify what we've been doing wrong, because we've been doing everything with full transparency. When we have contacts or offices here, this wasn't done in the dark and it just popped up in one day. It was a result of discussions, negotiations, agreements. The use of that office wasn't just an anticipation of an event like 7th of October, and it helped in that event to secure the release. It brokered a lot of ceasefires before, it prevented a lot of wars from happening and erupting, it stabilized the situation. Now, something went wrong and resulted with the 7th of October. It's not because that they have an office exist in Doha and that's what triggered. There are a lot of other factors, but in ignoring the other factors that triggered and caused all this, and just, you know, focusing on one element, which honestly it's cosmetic element. I mean, a political office, political representation that represent a communication channel, what kind of empowerment does it have except being a communication channel that serving this purpose? So the US administration, of course, they understand this very well. We've been doing this in full coordination and full openness with them. There are politicians, unfortunately, maybe they don't have the background about it. Once we engage with them, explain for them, they totally understand it and they totally get it. The ones whom we didn't have the chance to engage with or to explain that position, maybe this is should be a liability on us to engage. But in an overall, to sum it up, Qatar is a platform to convene between the different parties, is a platform where we arrange for everyone to bring them to the table, but and to make sure that they are keep engaging between each other, but also we are not expected to enforce solutions or to impose on them any kind of solution if the willingness is lacking.
Okay. I want to ask you, Foreign Minister, one last question on this topic. Veteran Norwegian diplomat, as you know, Tor Wennesland, is stepping down as the UN Middle East envoy. And he told the New York Times, politics failed, diplomacy failed, the international community failed, and the parties failed. Failed to bring about the permanent solution to the crisis that really affects this whole region and so much of the world. And I just want to ask you, because again, the incoming Trump administration appointees, let's say Mike Huckabee, who's being appointed as the ambassador, said this week that of course it's possible that the US would back the Israeli government were it to try to annex the occupied West Bank. I'm sure all of you have ideas about that, but where do you think that would lead? And do you think that's really something that the US would accept? Does Europe agree? Do you have any power to disagree? What do you make of that?
First, I think we should relate to the Trump administration for real when it's actually in office and when they are actually presenting real policies from the position of power. So not to preempt that too much by commenting directly on his comments, but I did say, and I will maintain that, you know, we will not be able to start solving the intricate set of problems in this region without dealing with the solution to Palestine, and the solution is not to perpetuate the occupation and make it into annexation. And this has also been very firmly put out by the International Court of Justice, which is everybody's court. It is the highest UN court, and very clear on the status of occupation as illegal. And I think we have to take that as a starting point as we move forward. And I do also think, as I said earlier, that there are some opportunities in working on the Abraham Accords approach, given the solid message that that can happen, but Palestine is part of it. But I very much wanted to underline what was said by the Prime Minister. Norway has a long tradition of peace mediation and dialogue facilitation, and we also very much share that vision that in order to get things done, you need to speak to the people that matters, even if those are people with blood on their hands and people you don't necessarily approve of. And speaking is not approving, speaking is not endorsement, speaking is necessary in order to facilitate the dialogue with the people that can actually change things. So here Qatar and Norway has very much made the same experience, and a part of that experience is that many of the key countries actually accept and approve that that has to be done. Even at times people who publicly say you shouldn't speak to this or that person or country or group will actually be very interested in what we actually hear when we speak to them, and that makes us quite confident in that that is a role that countries like us have to play, which is also why we work not only on the Middle East but also on Ukraine and Venezuela, and we worked for years on Afghanistan with that similar approach. I think that's necessary, and I think when a new administration is in place and looks at the whole picture in its totality, I think they will form a more holistic policy on this, and I very much look forward that we all can engage with them when they are there. I see opportunities, I see challenges, but I also see opportunities, and I think that there are an opportunity here for what actually could become the deal of the century. I mean, this could happen here, but it requires that some of these insights from the region are brought into the
I mean, as you remember, President Trump did recognize Israel's annexation of the Golan Heights, so it's not without precedent. But anyway, I hear what you're saying. Let's wait till they get into office. Foreign Minister Jaishankar, I want to ask you, and ask all of you in a moment, the major war roiling Europe. So you get a lot of cheap oil still from Russia, I believe. Cheap energy.
I get oil, yes.
Huh?
I get oil, yes.
Yeah,
It's
right.
not necessarily cheap.
But it's Russian.
If you have a better deal, I'm willing to look at it.
But it's Russian, and it's a good deal for you, despite sanctions and all the rest of it. It has been said that Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, etc., are sort of forming or have formed an axis of anti-Americanism, anti-Westernism. And I want to know, does India have a role to play, or what do you believe will be the momentum on this Russia invasion of Ukraine and the resolution? I know the Foreign Minister Lavrov is going to speak. What do you think is going to happen, particularly with the Trump administration, who I know they're not in office, but they have very, very clearly telegraphed that they don't want to keep helping Ukraine militarily?
Two comments. One, regarding the conflict, the war itself. You know, we've always held to the view that this war is not going to be solved on the battlefield. That at the end of the day, people are going to return to some kind of negotiating table, the sooner the better. And our effort has been to facilitate that to the extent possible. Now, to be honest with you, that's not always been the most popular thing, at least in some parts of the world. But I do think today the general sort of the needle is moving more towards the reality of a negotiation than the continuation of the war. We are trying to do, the bit I told you about why it's important for diplomacy to come forward.
Yeah.
Now we are really putting, in a way, our aircraft, our legs where our mouth is. We are actually doing, going to Moscow, talking to President Putin, going to Kiev, engaging President Zelensky, meeting them in other places, trying to see if we can encourage, find common threads which can be picked up at some point of time when the circumstances are right for it to be developed. We're not attempting a peace plan. We're not doing a mediation in that sense. We are doing multiple conversations and very transparent about telling each party, saying, look, at the end of the conversation, this is what we're going to tell the other party. We think that's, at this point of time, the most useful thing that any country wanting to see an end to that conflict can do diplomatically. We also believe in this, that we articulate the sentiments and the interests of the global south, 125 other countries who have found their fuel costs, their food costs, their inflation, their fertilizer costs impacted by this war. So there is a constituency out there which says, please do this, please carry on with this. And quite honestly, in the last few weeks and months, I've even seen this sentiment expressed by European leaders, major European leaders, who are actually telling us, please keep engaging Russia and engaging Ukraine. We welcome that. We do think that things are moving somewhere in that direction. Your second point about, is there such an axis? Look, perhaps in your world it sounds very effective and dramatic to sort of make this sort of sweeping assertion.
I didn't make it up.
Yeah,
they did.
No, but in my world, that's not the reality. Every country has its interests. They agree some, they disagree some, they work some. Sometimes the same countries work in different combinations in different issues. The reality is much more complicated, much more granular. And I caution people, saying don't go for this very sweeping generalities, because they become self-fulfilling if you actually accept them. I don't accept them. I do think each one of these is a nation with some history, with some certain self-regard, and each one of them is in it for themselves.
Yeah. Yes, I was coming to you on this because I think there'll be a lot more pressure from the Trump administration on Europe to take charge of their own security more. And the idea of giving weapons to Ukraine was, okay, maybe they thought they could help them win, but they never gave enough to help them win, but apparently not even enough to put them in a sort of co-equal place at the bargaining table. So how do you see an end to this diplomatically?
Well, actually, I think many were late, but we're giving much more now. We're also loosening restrictions for using advanced missiles into Russian territory, for instance, and several European countries, including my own, have over the last weeks actually stepped up quite a bit, both the quantity and quality of the contributions, because of course at the end of the day somebody have to talk, but it has to be a just peace. Not just peace, it has to be something that can create a post-war order in Europe, post-Ukraine war order, which we can all live with, and which does not reinforce that you can change borders by military means and that you can try to undermine other governments. And remember, there are some principles out there, and they are being violated big time. And when the Second World War ended, we got the UN Charter. We got some key principles of relations between states, one of them being the number one rule is thou shalt not invade and occupy other countries, whereas self-defense is legal. We also created rules for how war should be fought, the Geneva Conventions, international humanitarian law, and the Human Rights Charter. And when I criticize Russia, it's not because I happen to side with Ukraine, it's because they broke the fundamental principle in relations between states, and that shall not happen. And when I criticize Israel in Gaza, it's because they are massively overstepping the rules of warfare, meaning the distinction and proportionality principle in international law. And sometimes we actually have to take a principled approach. And the problem now is that we have one part of the world who is highlighting correctly Russia's violations of Ukraine's sovereignty, but being wobbly on Gaza. And then you have another part of the world who are correctly criticizing Israel in Gaza, but rather wobbly on the principles that have been violated in Ukraine. And I proudly say that I stand up for the principles in both cases. And I think we are much better off, particularly countries who are not the biggest ones on the planet, if we try to believe in the principles we agreed. And if we don't like them, we should change them collectively, not just keep ignoring them, because the outcome of that collective ignorance of the principles when they are not so favorable to your own friends and positions is that in the end there will be no principles left and we will all live in a much more dangerous world. So I think really I will demand behavior of Russia in Ukraine and I will demand compliance with international humanitarian law in Gaza.
Really interesting. And finally to you, Prime Minister Al-Thani, we've got a minute and 20 seconds left. We've talked about a lot of threats. We've talked about the principles of this forum. How does one innovate and dialogue one's way out of, for instance, climate? We haven't talked about that, and I think that's a huge issue here.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't...
Climate. We haven't talked about climate. What is another big threat that you're, that's on your plate right now?
Well, actually, look, from our perspective, when you look at the human needs pyramid, security is like the foundation of that pyramid. And basically, when you lack security, it means that everything on top of it will be considered as a secondary threat. And this is the nature of the human being. Today, in the Middle East, in our region, the main threat that we have is a security threat that we didn't figure it out yet. When we have all these conflicts, instead of being contained, being spreading out, then all other issues which are very highly concerning for us as governments are not really been thought of because of the foundation itself that's not being addressed. Now, when it comes to trying to think about issues and crises in more an innovative manner, I believe that the approach that we are trying to take here as a state of Qatar is really, when we look at any issue or any crisis around us from a security perspective, we are trying to break down this crisis and trying to isolate at least different verticals from each other and trying to address whatever we see as a quick win and then build on it from there. That will help in building momentum. This is basically the approach that we are trying to adopt. But when it comes to other issues like collaborative approach on climate, on food security, on issues that are required for our people and for our people prosperity, we believe that regional platforms now becoming more and more effective, more and more relevant to these kind of dialogues. And for example, in our case here in the region, the GCC platform represented one of the main facilitator for such a dialogue in those areas. And I believe that what we have accomplished in the past year especially has been something very, very important and very significant. Just to close, I know I see I see the clock. Just for as a matter to close with what my colleagues just mentioned on the situation in the region and Gaza and on the wider situation when it comes to Russia, Ukraine. Christian, the most important thing that we go back to the first principles and what His Excellency just mentioned now. When we are trying to apply international law, they need to be applied equally to everyone and to each and every conflict. Unfortunately, what we have seen, especially from the lens of the people of this region, that a lot of countries that's considered the leading countries in international law, leading countries in human rights law, they are just turning a blind eye from what's happening in the region and, looking at what's happening with Ukraine only from that lens, while in the region, no, it's different. We have other reasons. There are historical dimensions to this. Yes, we know there are historical dimensions to this, but these historical dimensions can never give the license to kill innocent people like this. Thank you.
Prime Ministers, Foreign Ministers, thank you so much indeed. Really interesting.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you to all your distinguished panelists for this wonderful opening session. A breath of fresh air to have such a diverse panel of leaders emphasizing, as you heard, the importance of dialogue, the importance of talking to the other side, no matter the differences, the importance of putting out the world's burning fires through dialogue and diplomacy. And this is what this forum is all about. Through the implementation of international law, through respect for international norms, and what are the pillars of our global system, not through force and military means. Our next session today is entitled Competitiveness in the Era of Intelligent Economies. It is in partnership between Qatar's Ministry of Finance and the World Economic Forum.